Hello, this is a special Citrus TV Sports breaking news report. Matt Reil, Christian Guzman. Syracuse men's basketball season ended yesterday with a second-round loss in the NIT tournament to Ole Miss. But the headlines haven't stopped. Christian, today, a lot of breaking news and a lot of turmoil going on within the organization, a lot of changes, and we'll begin with the first event that happened early this morning as Coach Mike Hopkins, the assistant head coach and the head coach in waiting for the Syracuse program, leaves and takes a 6-year deal to become the head coach of the University of Washington Huskies. When you heard that this morning, what was your initial reaction?
I think it's a great move for Coach Hopkins. He's been wanting a head coaching deal for quite a while now, and he's been in the head coaching conversation at jobs around the country for the past couple of years, and especially throughout his 22-year tenure at Syracuse. He's always been one of those top people that people really want in their programs to lead as their next head coach, and now that he gets a big opportunity at Washington, it's a great move for him. It's unfortunate for Syracuse, kind of throwing their plans for the future into a loop. But for Coach Hopkins, can't be a better move for him.
Now, why do you think Hopkins chose this time to leave? He was named the successor for Jim Boeheim in 2015 when Jim Boeheim announced he was going to retire after the 2017-2018 season. He's 1 year away from becoming the head coach at Syracuse. Why leave now?
Well, I think the main reason is that plans change, and it really changed when John Wildhack became the AD of Syracuse and when Mark Coyle left. When Mark Coyle left, Syracuse had a plan in place for Hopkins to take over, but then when John Wildhack became the athletic director after Mark Coyle left, those plans had to shift around. Wildhack probably wanted to do some different things, and that probably meant Jim Boeheim staying as head coach of the Syracuse basketball program for a little bit longer than anticipated. And so when Hopkins probably heard that Boeheim was going to stick around for a little bit while, he decided to probably open up his phone lines, and Washington called first.
Now, one of the big areas of this program that will be affected by Hopkins' departure is the recruiting. So let's look now at some of the big recruits that Coach Mike Hopkins brought in here to Syracuse. And you look here, Hakeem Warwick, Jerry McNamara, of course, one of the assistant head coaches in this program, Dion Waiters, Michael Carter-Williams, Rakeem Christmas, and some other big names up there. How will this impact their recruiting, Christian?
Well, it impacts it big time because not just these names, but Hopkins has been responsible for so many people coming to Syracuse as one of the main recruiters. It's not Jim Boeheim like some people might think. It's actually Coach Hopkins is one of the main people that really recruits heavily for Syracuse. You even look at this year, John Gillett and Pascal Chukwu both attributed Coach Hopkins as one of the big reasons why they came to Syracuse to be part of the Orange, and losing him as a recruiter is big because you might have not seen some of the big recruits, especially in the front court, because Hopkins mainly works with the front court. So maybe a guy like Pascal Chukwu would have not come to the Orange if it wasn't for Mike Hopkins.
Now, you mentioned it earlier, Jim Boeheim, another big piece of this news is about 6 hours later after Hopkins leaves, Jim Boeheim gets an extension that pushes him past the 2017-2018 year to be the SU head coach. Now, we don't have all the details. All that is really out there is that this extension, he'll be here longer than next year, which was his original date to retire. Big news, in that regard. How will that impact this, program going forward?
Well, it gives them some much-needed stability. There was a lot of what's going to happen with the program once Jim Boeheim leaves, and again, that's when Mark Coyle was the athletic director. Now with John Wildhack as the athletic director, I think now that gives him some stability for one of his most popular programs on campus, and that's really, really important for this program. I think that some stability was needed, especially after all the NCAA sanctions. So knowing that Jim Boeheim is going to be here for the foreseeable future, we obviously don't know how long, but the fact that he is here is big for Syracuse and its basketball program.
Yeah, but at some point, Christian, Syracuse is going to have to, realize that he won't be here forever. He will leave. So what do they have to do to prepare for that day in terms of recruiting and finding a new face of the program?
Well, they've already started doing that. The assistant coaches have been one of the big recruiters for the Syracuse program. Adrian Autry was one of the biggest recruiters for Syracuse even before Mike Hopkins was here. I should say even before Jim Boeheim, started to slow down on recruiting. He was one of the big reasons why Andrew White came to the Orange this year. So I think they're in a good spot. We'll just have to see how recruits will respond to the Syracuse program when Jim Boeheim's name is no longer attached to it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Adrian Autry. Just a quick little tidbit here before we, wrap up. He will be taking Mike Hopkins' spot as the lead assistant under Jim Boeheim. So Syracuse loses in the second round of the NIT, and then today, Mike Hopkins, the lead assistant under Jim Boeheim, leaves to take the Washington head coaching job, and Jim Boeheim signs an extension for the foreseeable future. A lot going on with this Syracuse basketball program. For continuing coverage of this, follow us on Twitter at CitrusTV Sports and on Instagram. You can also find us online at CitrusTV.com. We'll have continuing coverage there. For Christian Guzman, I'm Matt Reil, Citrus TV Sports.